This is Groove Talk with Froggy Style.
Welcome to another episode of Groove Talk, everybody. On this episode, I am joined by Madison and Taylor, and they are both part of the band Exit Division.
Hi, Cody. Thank you so much for having us. We can't wait to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. Just to start us off, could you guys maybe, just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the band?
Absolutely. So my name's Maddie Lee. That's usually what I go by in the band. And let's see. So I'll let Taylor introduce himself. But as for other members in the band, on bass we have Ben Whelans. We have on rhythm guitar, and she also does our harmonies and string arrangements in the studio, Katie O'Connor. And on lead guitar, we have Mason Abbott. And I'll pass it off to Taylor.
And of course, I'm Taylor Miles, and I beat tubs with sticks in Exit Division.
And I guess I forgot to mention this, but I am the keyboard player and the lead singer of Exit Division.
Awesome. So I guess, could you give us a little bit of background information on the band?
Absolutely. So Exit Division has actually been around for a long time. I'm the only original member of Exit Division. It's been around for about, I want to say it's coming up on 4 years. I started the band with a friend a long time ago, just writing songs, busking, doing small gigs, coffee shops, outdoor festivals, small coffee shop gigs, sometimes open mic nights at the Ironwood. So that's all really fun. And then, it kind of kept going. We had a pretty good list of songs started, and at that point it was like, well, maybe we should get a drummer and a bass player. So started putting out ads on Instagram. I guess we started an Instagram page, and that's we reached out to people, and then we got a first set of a drummer and a bass player, and then we started playing real gigs in pubs and putting on our own shows. And then the band evolved, new members joined, and now today, the 5 of us that are here are all new members. Taylor, I want to say, has been in the band for about a year and a half. Does that sound right to you, Taylor?
Yeah, close to a year and a half. I think I joined close to around, I forget the month. I think it was around Halloween.
Yeah.
October.
Yeah, and the other members, Katie and Mason, Taylor and Ben joined around the same time, and then our other members, Katie and Mason, guitar players, actually joined, I guess, about a year ago now, and then that was right about the time we started working on our album, so it all came together really quickly.
Awesome. So I know that a lot of musicians kind of hate this question, but I guess for those of our listeners who don't know, what kind of music would you say that you guys are making right now?
That's actually an interesting question. I'm going to pass it off to Taylor because I think he'll have some interesting insight on this. But we've been talking about this quite a bit lately.
Oh yeah, we've been trying to find our sound, exactly what genre we are. Because if you listen to the album, there's actually a lot of diversity in our songs. There's some heavy songs and there's a lot of slow songs, or more, I guess, to the poppy side songs. So I'd say it's just a general idea. We are more alt rock, but we all have inspirations from different bands. Ben is a huge Weezer fan. I know that. I'm a big Tool guy. But just there, you can see there's a huge difference there, and we all kind of just come together to make our songs. And I think the big influence that we can all agree on is Deftones. But we are trying to find out how we can make ourselves sound like that.
Yeah, I mean, like Taylor said, there's a lot of different influences in the band, and I think it's about finding that common thread. For the first album, I mean, I think there was so many different songwriters involved writing individually, and I think our goal going into another project is to figure out really how to lock into each other and make it a bit more of a collaborative process and really figure out how we can mix the sounds of each of us to find something that's unique to us, and then hopefully all our songs kind of have that common thread going forward. yeah, drawing from all these influences, that's what we're going through all that now and figuring out what that common thread is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's kind of interesting to hear what some of your guys' influences are, because you can definitely hear kind of some of those themes or sounds in your album, just like Tool, for example. Like, when I hear that album, I kind of think, this is very reminiscent of like Tool, but then you go into the later songs on the album, and like you said, they're more kind of soft and like ethereal and like ballady almost. And it's like I get like, I don't know, very kind of like, yeah, alt rock, progressive rock vibes from it. There's almost like even a Pink Floyd edge to it, which I really dig. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I guess how long have you guys been? When did you start working on this album?
So, what is it? It's February now. Actually, we started working on the album of March. I think it was March last year. And that was Mason and Katie had just joined the band in February. And then all of a sudden in March, it was the lockdown. And then we're like, well, what are we going to do? I mean, we had a set list. We were going to play shows. And then that wasn't happening anymore. So that kind of forced us to work on a new project. And that's when we started having Zoom meetings instead of doing in-person rehearsals. And then since we weren't able to actually play together, it was like, well, what else can we do? Well, we can learn about social media marketing, we can write new songs, we can make demos and send them to each other. So a lot of focus on that as soon as COVID started.
So this entire album was basically written, start of the pandemic and right throughout?
Yes.
Oh yeah, and we all wrote it just from the safety of our own homes, under our own roofs, and we just recorded our own individual parts, put them up on a Google Drive, and we just put all the parts together in like a Pro Tools project or a Logic project or whatever we had, and then we brought those ideas to the studio.
Yeah, it all came together very quickly.
Oh yeah.
I mean, honestly, that's very impressive, because the album has a very cohesive sound to it, and you wouldn't be able to tell that it was written, in different rooms for the most part. It sounds like a very cohesive and solid project.
Thank you. We appreciate that. It's actually an interesting point you make, because I mean, now in the digital age that we live in, it's like people need to find new ways to do things and ways to still be active in whatever their careers are in music, especially because it's performance-based, it's based around interacting with others, being social. So, I mean, yeah, it's great for people to learn how to use technology to their advantage, especially in the age of COVID.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And like even doing this podcast, I had to adapt. Like, normally I do the podcast in person. I have people come to my house, or I go to their house or whatever, and we sit down and have like a conversation face to face. So even just kind of adapting to doing it online like we're doing right now was a bit of a challenge for me. And I feel like at the first stages of the pandemic, it was kind of like, I'm going to sit back and I'll see what happens. But as we continue, going on with the social distancing and, the isolation and stuff like that, it was like, okay, well, now I think it's time to adapt and figure out how I can still do this from the safety of my home, and the musicians from the safety of their home, and technology is the answer, right? And this is actually the first multi-Zoom podcast that I've done. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
You're totally right.
Yeah. So I guess what made you guys decide to, go with a full-length album for your first project?
I think there was a conversation that we had that, like, I think the point was that we wanted to, because we had all of our friends' bands, and we had all seen them live, and they were all putting out EPs and all that stuff, and we thought that was great, but we wanted to be different, I guess. We wanted to, like, not do what everyone else was doing, and that was putting out an EP. So we decided, let's write a whole schwack of songs, put them all on an album. So that's what we did.
I love what you said there, Taylor. I want to add too that so much of this album is a story. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
like Taylor said before, we draw from lots of different genres, but there is a common thread in the lyrics for sure. Like, there's an arc, and it all came down to like youth mental health. That's really what this album was. We were in the age of COVID, so we talked about our personal experiences, and like to us, we wanted to make that the whole project one unit. It tells the story, and it kind of has a beginning and an end through the lyrics, instead of, okay, these are all totally separate songs that aren't connected. And the album was the best way to have that one big cohesive art project, because it really was this piece of art.
Yeah, and I mean, I appreciate a good album. I've always been an album fan, Lots of people kind of, especially with the way that technology is going and streaming services and things like Spotify, I feel like people are kind of maybe migrating more to like releasing singles or EPs or shorter pieces of music. So when somebody releases like a really solid album, I really appreciate it, because that's how I enjoy listening to music. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying thank you for paying attention to that and releasing an album for those of us who still really dig albums.
No, absolutely. And I guess there's two sides to the coin there. I mean, singles are a great way to promote yourself when you're just starting out. So doing an album was a tricky decision, because it's like, okay, we exhaust all of our creative on this one thing. So it's something that's really hard to keep promoting. I mean, it is kind of smart in some capacities to say, okay, I'm gonna write 7 singles and release them over the course of the year, and that keeps fresh content coming. You have that big pillar content throughout the year, and then, I mean, that's one really good way to build your audience as a young musician, young artist. So it was a tricky decision, but overall we decided that the story was extremely important to us.
Okay, awesome. So I guess how do you guys keep up excitement for the album? Like, how do you what are your singles every month or whatever? How do you keep fans engaged after releasing such a big body of work?
That's a great question. From my perspective, we talk a lot. Like I said, as soon as the pandemic hit, we were going on to Zoom meetings, and then it was like, okay, the focus is off live performance. What are we now focusing on? It was marketing and promotion, social media. So we have been a lot more active on our social medias, which is good, and we've been finding other creative ways, like doing lesson tutorials, doing like interviews, all sorts of different kinds of things that can keep our audience engaged, reaching out to other bands, introducing ourselves, creating connections. That's something we love to do. And then other than that, I would say, I guess there was singles involved in the album, but they were a piece of the album. So one technique we used was we released a single, we waited a few weeks, another single, and then it was the album. So that was one of the things we did. And then it gets a little bit tricky, because we had this plan to do a series of music videos and an album release show that was going to be live streamed. But since the COVID restrictions got a little bit more strict, those things have been postponed, because obviously even the 5 of us can't get together right now to do those things. So that's really difficult. But yeah, we did have a little bit of the stages at the beginning, and now we're just waiting for when we can record the rest of our music videos.
Well, yeah, we were tossing around a lot of music video ideas, and they're all like great. We all love them. But the challenge is, how do we do that with the current COVID restrictions in place? So it's pretty tough to work around that. So I think one of the biggest challenges we face is creating content, like you said. But I mean, with all the, we are doing lesson videos, and I think we've got something big coming up with those. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and sorry, just real quick, that's how I became aware of you guys, is because of your social media. So, I mean, you're obviously doing something, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that. I was also going to say, too, we managed to record one music video back in September, and I think we're kicking ourselves a little bit, because probably should have, if we got a whole bunch done back then, we could have done our original release plan, but that's just how it goes, right? We have to adapt. And now what we're really talking about is, okay, is there a creative way we can do a music video separately? Can we film something separate that still comes together as a cohesive piece of art? Is there a really creative idea that we can come up with that, you know, we can all be safe and do, but still kind of gets the product that we want? So, I mean, the circumstances are pushing us, and in some ways that can be a good thing because we have been challenging ourselves.
Yeah. It seems like it's the situation that we find ourselves in is challenging you guys to kind of think outside the box. And, like I said, I became aware of you because of your social media videos, and it's cool that you're doing tutorial videos and stuff on your songs. Like, I don't see a lot of other musicians kind of doing that thing. And also something that I noticed that you guys were doing that I thought was really neat is kind of telling the story of your songs, like, how certain parts in a song came together, or like what the story behind a certain song is. And I think that that's really neat because, like I said again before, I'm a fan of the album. I'm a fan of the story behind the songs. And that's why this podcast even exists, right? Is because I want to know that. I want to know the stories behind the songs and stuff like that. So I guess what kind of motivated you guys to do that?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it was necessarily this is my own personal writing style, but I never go into a song with the story in mind previously. That's a bit of a weird way to go about it, but for me personally, as soon as a song starts coming together, it finds meaning for me. So that's a little bit backwards compared to what most people do, I think, is which they have some sort of idea and then they maybe write something based off that. But these songs were coming together maybe unintentionally by all of us, and then we realized, hey, Katie's song, my song, this song that we had previously, there's a common thread there. I mean, we're talking about similar things, and this could really tell an interesting story. So it was very unintentional, but it came together very nicely.
I think like posting those stories like on social media was just one of those ideas that came together in the Zoom meetings. Like it just kind of happened, and we were like, "Oh, that's a cool idea. Why don't we do it?" And then obviously the lesson videos were coming after those. So I just think it's one of those things that came together really nicely, and I guess it paid off.
Yeah.
So thanks.
I would say too, COVID pushed us to do something that we would not have, through the Zoom meetings, we started talking a lot more about things that we didn't really want to think about. I mean, the business side of music and all those things that are tedious and they're hard and no one likes doing them, but are really necessary when you're in the music industry. And it pushed us to get on that train and start educating ourselves and start having serious conversations about, okay, well, what are our roles in the band and how are we going to tackle this whole other side of the industry that has nothing to do with music? And that was really, really great for us. I mean, because at our live rehearsals, it's just something you don't want to do. Everyone's kind of there's a certain energy, everyone's kind of in the moment, and no one wants to like pause for an hour and talk about sync licensing or how to get streams or how to build your audience or social media marketing. So these Zoom meetings, it's something I would recommend to any young band. Sitting down with your band seriously and talking about, because there's a whole other side. To me, it's like, to music, there's two sides. It's not just the fun stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like that's, any creative endeavor that you're kind of putting out there and trying to make a go at it, there is those two sides, right? There's the business side and then there's like the creative side. Everybody loves the creative, fun side, but nobody wants to talk about the business side. So
absolutely.
Yeah, it's cool that you were able to that COVID kind of pushed you guys to maybe take a more serious look at that and kind of develop strategies of how are we going to be relevant and get people's attention without being able to play live.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of curious, how do your guys' songs typically kind of come together?
It's a very good question. Taylor, do you want to talk a little bit to this?
Normally, actually, our songs don't come together like collaboratively. Normally, mostly. Normally, one person will write the main riff or just the entire song, and then we will all write our own parts on top of that, and then kind of just like talk about that, trying to find the balance. But we've never really written a song together until actually in the studio. Unending, the last track on the album, we wrote that, or I guess I didn't have much of a say in it, but everyone else wrote that because there's no drums in the song. Everyone else wrote that together. Like, I think Ben was just jamming. We were all just having a late night conversation, and Ben was just jamming out on an acoustic guitar, and that all just like caught our ear, and we were like, that's cool. We should do something with that. And then Maddie started jotting down some lyrics, and it all just came together, and we decided it needed to go on the album. But that's kind of the only song that we wrote collaboratively. Like I said, it's normally only one person that writes the song.
Yeah, and I think too, that's something we're talking about more and more is like, okay, what's our sound? How are we going to write collaboratively? And that gets even tougher online because the easiest thing to do is what we were doing before by someone writing a song and then us adding our parts. But I think as we get more and more serious about finding our identity as a band and really like honing in on our style, I think becomes more important to figure out how to work collaboratively and blend those styles. And another thing that I'd like to add on was the studio was an amazing experience for us in the way that we got to live together for 9 whole days. We were out at OCL Studios and we actually slept there, and we ate together, we cooked together, we meal planned, we spent every moment together, we slept there. We had times where we hung out in the pool, and then we were in the studio all day, and that experience for us being 100% fully immersed in each other as well as the project, I think that did something too in terms of the story of the album, because I don't think it would have came together quite the same if it had been, okay, we'll go on this day and record some of it, maybe we'll track the drums, and then we'll come back. Like, I think for us, being there together for a solid amount of time and just being able to devote ourselves to the project and forget about that anything else in the world existed was kind of key to us recording the album.
Okay, yeah, I've heard really actually cool things and good things about OCL Studios, and that's one of them. You know, it's so cool that there's a place where, you know, they record music, but then they also host these bands so that they can like live together and I don't know. I think that it's such a neat way to record music personally.
Oh yeah, I think it just creates probably one of the coolest experiences any of us have ever had. Like, it's just so surreal to be in the studio with kind of people that, you know, we all have the same idea. We're all doing this together. And we're also it was just kind of a bonding experience, I guess, as well as, you know, creating Psychosis.
Awesome. So I guess how much attention do you pay to kind of everything that isn't the music that goes on the album? You know, I'm talking about, you know, like artwork and stuff like that.
That's an interesting question. I think the artwork was a natural transition after we kind of had our 13 or 14 solid demos. I think it was, well, okay, we know the story of the album. We've talked about what it means to us and what we hope like it resonates with the rest of the world. So we know this story. And now how do we represent that in art? And that was an interesting question. So it took us a while to find someone that we connected with, but I came across someone named Keegan Carlson. He's local, young artist, and absolutely amazing work beyond his years. And I showed it to the band, and I was like, guys, I think his work is really connected with me, and I want you guys to take a look at this because I think that this is a really good fit for the album. And everyone was like, yeah, this is really cool. And then from there, it was like, okay, we sat down with Keegan. we told him the story of the album, we had him listen to the songs, and then he was like, okay, I understand. If you'll let me, I'm just going to kind of take this away, and I'm going to kind of try to put your vision down on a canvas. And that's exactly what he did. And we couldn't be more thrilled with how well he captured the intention of the album.
Awesome. I'm kind of curious, what maybe is one of the bigger challenges that you guys faced, maybe besides the pandemic, with constructing this album?
That's a great question. Biggest challenges. I'll go first. I think maybe one of the biggest challenges is time. Yeah, I want to say time because, like I said, we started playing with the new members in March, and actually we haven't played a live show with all of the new members, so it's kind of crazy actually. We were a band born out of COVID, so I think that was a big struggle because it's like, how do we really find pocket on these songs? How do we tighten them up? How do we do all these things without playing together? And then it's like, as soon as we went into the studio, we didn't want it to be, these songs aren't well enough rehearsed, right? So that was another challenge we faced. But I mean, when COVID restrictions allowed in the summer, we actually took a trip up to my family's cabin, and we stayed there for 3 days. It was a few weeks before the album, and we set up in the living room, and everyone was living out there. We did the same thing. We had to meal plan together. It was a bonding experience, and we were there for 3 days, and all we did was we went through the entire album. We talked about the whole story arc. We got that all solidified, and we just played and played and played and played and played.
That's awesome. It's so kind of interesting to me that, like, you guys are this band that was basically born from COVID. You know, you haven't played a live show together yet. So I guess when live shows are a thing again, and we're allowed to gather and, you know, go listen to live music, I guess, have you been thinking about what your live show is going to be like, or have you gotten that far yet? Or I'm kind of interested in that whole thing, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
I guess we haven't really talked about that, but I think it's definitely something that we all want to do so bad.
Taylor
just get out there
especially.
and play shows. Yes, I am so anxious to get back out on stage. But yeah, we've never really talked about how we're gonna, I guess, reintroduce that.
I think one thing, though, that we have talked about is how our stage show kind of fits with our identity and our style as a band. Something that we've been talking about, like mixed in with, you know, the marketing and branding. Branding is a huge thing, and that comes down to what we sound like first and foremost, but also like our persona, our identity as a band, our stage show, like how we act, how we interact with fans. That's something we are definitely developing. It's like, okay, well, what do we wear on stage? It comes down to that, right? Because there's bands that have costumes, there's bands that really have a style, and then it's like, okay, well, what's our thing? What works for us? What really showcases our identity and helps bring a face to the music, right? When we're representing that. So that is something that we talk about, and our stage performance too is something that is probably an area of growth for us, actually, because it's something we haven't had a lot of time to work on. Like, how are we going to be energetic on stage? How are we going to interact with fans? How are we going to talk to the audience? All those things are super important to us, but something that needs more time. We definitely need more practice on that before we reintroduce ourselves.
Okay. I'm just kind of curious, do you guys have a lot of kind of stage experience outside of this band, or what's your kind of stage experience previous, I guess?
It's interesting, actually.
I know.
Yeah. I'll let Taylor take
I know
this.
I do. Because actually I was part of, I don't know if you've heard of it, but the School of Rock in Calgary. It was just like we played shows all around the city, and I think it was just a great learning experience for me. And then we got into this band, and I guess it just kind of rubbed off, I guess, naturally. But I know Ben, the bass player, played his first ever live show with us. So that was something completely new for him, and I think he got a really good kick out of that.
Yeah, I would say Taylor definitely has a natural energy on stage, and that might be partly due to experience, right? Because actually, I went to School of Rock as well. Me and Taylor played there together for a couple years, and we were in the house band and performance groups, and we got to play at festivals, gigs all across Calgary, in pubs and bars, and even travel a little bit to Regina. Yeah, and so, I don't know, I mean, for up-and-coming musicians, I mean, I don't know, maybe we played close to 100 shows. I'm not sure about you, Taylor, but School of Rock, like, they had us playing every weekend, and that was amazing experience for me. Speaking for myself, when I look back at the first show I ever played on stage, I can see that I was very timid, and I stood there, and I didn't want to interact with anyone or talk at all. But then as it progresses, as I watch the videos, I can see, okay, I was loosening up, and every time I got so much more comfortable. So that progression for myself is really interesting to see. And then, I mean, for the rest of the band, like Taylor said, Ben played his first show back soon after he joined the band, and I mean, he was super nervous before going on stage, but then he had such a natural, I don't know, passion for it and energy on stage that it was never an issue for him after that. So he caught on really quickly, whereas I did not. So I think it's different for everyone. And yeah, Mason and Katie are super new, and we haven't had the opportunity to play with them a lot, but we're looking forward to finding that, how everyone gels together on stage and finding that groove for everyone.
Awesome.
And I think that's also a thing that goes away with experience too, is like the nerves of being in front of a whole schwack of people that you don't know. Because I know my first show, it was even before School of Rock. There were music lessons that I was taking at Longham Quaid, and our instructor, his name was Connor, and he was like, we got a few songs together, and then we went down to the Ship and Anchor, and I remember I just played drums with my head down the entire time. I didn't look at anybody, and I was so nervous. I probably got in and out of tempo so many times, but then now I'm at the point where like I barely even feel nerves anymore.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays when we play a show, when someone takes a picture of you, your hands are either in the air or your hair is standing straight up because you're bopping along to the music, so it's awesome. And then Ben too, I mean, we found this one screenshot, I think, from a show where Ben's hair is literally coming straight off his head. It's straight up because he's just grooving so hard to the music. So it's really funny now how everyone has gotten more comfortable. That's a really interesting thing to see.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. It's actually very interesting that you both came from the School of Rock program. I actually talked to Brian Schaefer on one of the old podcasts. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he's School of Rock South founder, I believe.
That is, yes.
Yeah, so it's real cool to see, talking to him and hearing about the program and hearing what they do and finding it really interesting and, wishing that, when I was younger, there was something like that, something that kind of not only taught you how to play music, but taught you how to be in a band. And I think that that's what School of Rock does really well.
I remember too, like I had classical piano teachers and stuff like that before I ever joined School of Rock. And I mean, I was starting to dread playing music. I never wanted to practice. It just like, it wasn't for me reading sheet music, that I did not connect with it. And I was like, okay, maybe music isn't for me. And then at the School of Rock, they took such a different approach. It was like, okay, it doesn't matter how well you can play or what your skills are. We're going to get you up on stage and you're going to try it. And that was so powerful because it's like, okay, I'm jumping right in and I'm going to learn as I go. And that to me, like I had so much fun and I wasn't so worried. And then I had a newfound like passion for it, I guess, and that's when I was like, okay, I do want to develop my skills on the piano, and I do want to do this stuff, but I needed that the fun aspect of it, I guess, first to inspire me.
Yeah, I think that's something that School of Rock does so well. It shows you kind of, the fun side of music, and it kind of lets you know that, you can be as technically proficient as all hell, but if you don't know how to perform on stage, then it's going to be difficult for you to progress in music, right?
Absolutely.
Totally.
And that's exactly what we're trying to bring into our own band, because I mean, entertaining an audience is half what you sound like and half, how energetic you are and what you look like and how you engage the audience. So yeah, it's so important.
Do you guys find it easier working with each other because you were both in the School of Rock program, or I guess how does that dynamic kind of unfold?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. I think the whole dynamic of the band has been really good. Everyone has different strengths. I will say that. And I think that's very powerful. Like, for instance, Katie O'Connor, she plays, like I said, rhythm and when we play live. But in the studio, her strength was writing and arranging the strings for the entire album. None of us have that skill, but it was all something we really wanted, and she saw that side of it, and she comes from a different perspective. So all of our strengths are different. And I mean, speaking to me and Taylor, we did have that connection from School of Rock, but I think now, especially after we spent those 9 days bonding in the studio, I think everyone has just as strong of a connection with each other, and we built friendships, and now our working dynamic is pretty tight. We get on our Zoom meetings, we know when it's time, okay, we got to get down to business, we have to talk about these things, and everyone is so, I will say that it works because everyone's kind to each other. They're like, they understand that we all have responsibilities sometimes in school and things like that, so when someone isn't able to maybe do something, there's others that are willing to pick up the slack, and then it's a very give and take relationship, and we're all very understanding of each other, and we're all willing to put in hard work, which I really appreciate from everyone.
Awesome. I will say that there, you kind of touched on it before, how this album is kind of about the experience of you all going through kind of the pandemic and the experience of the youth kind of going through the pandemic, and you're kind of putting that message out there. So when you're writing songs and you're arranging an album and stuff like that, how important is it to convey a message like that? Is that something that you focus on at all, or is it just kind of the byproduct of what you guys have created?
It's an awesome question. Yeah, I guess like I said before, meaning usually comes to me after, but I think it was pretty natural in the way that we're all young adults, and the experiences that we're going through and what's relatable to us kind of naturally comes out in our songwriting. So I think that part of it was natural. Yeah, you're right. We're just kind of putting in the music exactly what our perception of the world is and our personal experiences, and putting that together in a story came very naturally, because it's like, okay, well, we can all relate to sometimes being a young person in this world is difficult, and this is kind of what that feels like, but we can also relate to these other feelings. And it was, I think, the fact that we're all, even though there is an age range, Taylor is 15 and Mason is 22, our guitar player. So there is an age range in the band, but in spite of that, we're all experiencing the same things right now, and we could all relate to the same stories, and that kind of just felt natural to all of us.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I think finding the meaning in the song is more than half the battle. If you can have a great song, but I think having the meaning of the song in there is that's just gives it that extra push. It makes it feel that much more filling, I guess. There's on the album, there's because like Maddie said, she doesn't think about the meaning before Like she writes the lyrics and then she gives it meaning. There's actually 3 songs, consecutive songs on the album: Raven, Prison House, and Turn the Key. And they all kind of tie in together. Like they all follow the same story. And we didn't even mean to do that. Like they just tie in together with each other so well. And I don't know, I think it's just I want to say it's like a gift that we have to just give meaning to the song, and the public can just interpret their song, give these songs their own meaning to what they feel, because it's the album to us is more about like what we are feeling, our emotions that we are hiding, I guess. But someone may think of it as like it's the journey along life, or it's how to deal with a pandemic. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think ambiguity to me is key in my songwriting, because I never want to give it all away. I never like to be too blunt or straightforward in my songwriting. And I guess that comes too with, like, I don't always write with the meaning in mind, because the exact words maybe aren't the best words I could use to convey that emotion. So I find sometimes maybe subconsciously that's kind of why those lyrics come out, but then they end up coming out in a more subtle way, right? So, I mean, anyone can look at a set of lyrics and give it 100 people, give it 100 different meanings, right? So ambiguity to me is super important, and that's kind of why I like doing it that way.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think, when you're crafting songs like that, you're walking a line, right? You're trying to make it meaningful for you, but you also want to leave enough room for interpretation that the audience can attribute their own meaning to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's, basically kind of what you said there. So, yeah. So that's actually just finding the age range of your guys' band. That's actually very surprising, because the sound that you guys are able to produce, I would classify as like a very like mature sound. That's what like comes to mind when I hear it. It's not just the parts, the way that they interplay with each other, and then the way that they play off of each other, and just like the textures of the music are all very thought out. And like I said, I just feel like it comes from experience, which you guys obviously have, maybe playing from such a young age. But yeah, it's a very mature sound that you guys are able to produce, for sure.
Thank you. We really appreciate you saying that. That's, yeah. I will say too that maybe half of the uniqueness of it is that we come from such a different perspective, that we don't know all the rules. We're not like seasoned musicians who have been in the industry forever and kind of feel, I don't know, maybe we don't feel obligated to do it any certain way, because we're just learning in some capacities. So that's kind of a beautiful thing as well, because maybe there's some things that we don't do right, but then there's other things that, okay, we find a different way to do it, or we look at it from a perspective that's maybe different from other people. So that's a beautiful thing, just as being a seasoned musician and being really good at what you do is also a beautiful thing.
So do you have any maybe tips for the younger people out there, maybe who are looking to start their first band or start playing, I guess playing shows is, a ways away yet, but I guess what tips would you give for the younger people out there who are looking to get involved in music and like kind of form a band?
Yeah, that's for me personally. I feel like I used to get stuck so much on the specifics of what I didn't know, and how everything seemed so big and scary, and there was so much to learn and not enough time to do it. And I would get hung up on that, and it's like, well, I can't let anyone hear me before I have these things done, and I can't reach out to anybody because I haven't experienced this or I haven't done that. And it's like, well, how do I get from point A to point B, right? But my advice would be, actually, like, looking back just a little bit, I haven't had obviously that much experience, but from what I know, I mean, I would have said, sometimes you just have to put yourself out there, and that's the way you get from A to B. That's the way that you learn things and push yourself. It's by playing with people that are better than you and being uncomfortable sometimes and messing up sometimes and learning from that. I mean, you can't do anything just by keeping it to yourself, keeping it safe, and waiting till it's perfect, because nothing's ever going to be perfect. And I think that's something we learned, like even going to the studio, nothing is ever perfect, and there's always something else you could add, but it's a matter of like, well, is this a good representation of my ability and my experience of the world at the time? And yeah, it was. So we can be proud of that. We can be happy with that, and we can learn from it, and we can move on. And I think that's one of the best things that young people can do. Just get started and know that it's okay to not be where that person's at, or to not know these things, or to just go out there, right?
Yeah, no.
And I guess there's not really a limit on like where you can go. I guess, like, for example, in Exit Division, like, you know, me being 14, and then there's Mason who's 21. There's no limit, and then you really don't see that in our music, I guess, like you said. But yeah, like Maddie said, just get your name out there, because you never know what you may find. Because for Maddie met me at School of Rock, and that's how we're here now. And then Ben, to get in this band, we put out an ad on our audition, and he probably just said, you know what, let's give it a try, and now he's our bassist. So really, I guess the worst thing that someone else could say is no, and then that just brings new opportunities, and you just set yourself up for as many opportunities as you possibly can.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with what you guys said there. It's, you know, making yourself uncomfortable, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, taking chances, all of that is where growth kind of stems from, right? And like you said, Taylor, the worst that anybody is going to say to you is no. And at the end, it's not like, I know probably sometimes in our heads we build it up like, oh, you know, if I'm bad, they're going to sit there and laugh and make fun of me or whatever. But nobody is ever going to do that ever, right? The worst that anything will happen is they say no. And then you're just in the same position that you were going into it, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to try, right?
yeah. You got to try, and you got to learn from your mistakes as well.
Of course. Absolutely.
So I guess, is there... What kind of does the future hold for Exit Division? What is 2021 looking like for you guys?
Great question. Taylor, do you want to speak to that first?
Like we said before, how Psychosis came together, we are doing the very same process. We are writing songs here at our home, like, as we speak. And we're just putting demos together. I think we have a folder of, like, over 20 songs, or not songs, but ideas that have potential. And I think that's gonna help us a lot going forward, and maybe album number 2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I want to say too, going back to what I said earlier, like, that's something that's gone really well, that I would say to a young artist, like, be kind to each other. Not every song or idea is going to be all that. But I mean, our mentality in the band is we give everything a go. And when it all comes down to it, okay, we can make some decisions and decide what direction we want to go in, but give everything a shot. Like, I don't think you should ever be scared to show your writing partners or your band something that you're working on. And if they do react poorly to that, then maybe they're not a kind person to be working with. But that's something that's been monumental in our relationship, because we put all these songs in this folder and we listen to them, and we're not too critical with each other, especially at the beginning. Like, we never say, oh, that idea is bad, we're not gonna try it, we're not gonna give it a go. And that's kind of how sometimes songs come together. Like, it's this really strange idea, well, all of a sudden, through someone else's lens, it'll become something else. So everything has possibility. And yeah, going into our next project, I think the only thing that will be different is that we have more experience. We've done it once, so we'll take all the things that we learned and just, like I said, all you can do, everything is imperfect. So all you can do is be the best representation of yourself at the time. And for Psychosis, I feel like we're all proud of that. And then we can learn from that. We can pick it apart and we can decide how to make the next project even better. And that's same process, but more experience.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think what you said there is really important for people to hear, is try new things, put things out there. Again, don't be afraid to fail. And, you're never going to know unless you try. And whether that be writing new songs, trying different genres out, whatever it may be, like, that's how new and exciting art is created, right? It's by people trying new things. It's by people like you guys coming together who have a multitude of different influences and coming together and making music under one thing, and those influences shine through in different ways, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I just want to say I really appreciate what you guys are doing. I think that you're doing a good job with your videos, your social media. Your album is awesome. It's so surprising to me that you came together in a pandemic and were able to create something that is just so cohesive, and the brand is solid, and just everything that you guys are doing is very impressive. So are there just kind of any final things that you want to say before we kind of close this out?
I just want to say thank you so much, Cody, for having us. This was awesome. So much fun. We forget what other people look like because we're all at home alone. So it's great to be able to chat with other people and talk about music and, life and amidst the crazy things that are happening. But thank you so much, Cody, and Groove Talk podcast. We had an awesome time.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for taking the time to chat with me. This was lots of fun, and I'll have all of your social media links and where people can find your music. That'll all be in the episode notes, so it'll be real easy for people to find if they would like to connect with you.
Bound, but we are cold, and I
If you like this episode of Groove Talk, why not leave a review? You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or pretty much anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Help us break through those evil algorithms and reach the most amount of glorious listeners that we possibly can. For up-to-date information on the show, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can find us at Froggy Style Productions. For more ways to support the show, visit fsproductions.ca.